Four readers sit in 4 different centuries, each holding the same thin book. One closes it convinced he has found a manual for tyrants. One closes it convinced he has found a weapon for free peoples. One sees the first cold science of power, stripped of God. One sees a moral revolution, the overthrow of 2,000 years of ethics. They are not careless. They are among the most careful readers the tradition produced. They are working from the same sentences, in the same order, in the same short text. This video is not about what Machiavelli said. You already know the doctrine, the lion and the fox, better feared than loved, the ends and the means. This video is about the war over what those things meant, a war that has run for 400 years and shows no sign of ending. The question that drives everything is not which reading is correct. The question is stranger and deeper. What kind of book produces honest, irreconcilable readings from serious minds? And what follows about morality itself if no reading can be made to win? Part 1. 4 books in 1. Start with the fact that should not be possible. Take a physics paper. Careful readers may dispute its conclusions. They will not disagree about what it claims. The claims are pinned down. The words mean one thing. Now take The Prince. The disagreement is not about whether Machiavelli is right, it is about what he is even saying. And the people who disagree are not amateurs. Consider the 4 positions directly, because the puzzle only bites once you feel their range. The first reader finds a handbook for tyrants. Machiavelli tells the ruler when to lie, when to kill, when to keep faith, and when to break it. This is the reading carved into the word itself. To be Machiavellian is to be coldly, willingly cruel. The second reader finds almost the reverse. This reader points out that Machiavelli spent his life serving a republic, that his longer book, The Discourses, is a sustained defence of popular liberty. On this view, The Prince is the work of a republican, and somewhere in it, a free people is being armed against its masters. The third reader sets the morality aside entirely. This reader sees the first man to describe power the way a naturalist describes an animal. Not how rulers should behave, how they do behave when you strip away the comforting stories. This is Machiavelli as the founder of a science. The fourth reader finds something larger than politics. Not a man without morals, but a man who saw that there is more than one morality, that the Christian virtues and the virtues that build a strong state are not the same and cannot both be honoured at once. This reader finds a revolution in ethics hiding inside a book about princes. Hold these 4 together: Tyrant's Manual, Republican Weapon, Cold Science, Moral Revolution. They cannot all be the main thing the book is doing, yet each is built from the actual text, not imposed on it from outside. The reflex is to ask which reader got it right. That reflex is a trap. It assumes the book has one settled meaning, and that 3 of these readers simply failed to find it. But these are not failures of attention. They are the work of people who gave the text more attention than almost anyone alive. So the real question changes shape. We are not grading the readers. We are asking about the book. What features must a text have for honest and brilliant people to walk away holding opposite things, each able to point at the page? That is a question about the text itself, and the answer to it comes before any of the rival readings. Before we can judge who is right, we have to see what it is about this particular book that refuses to hold still. Part 2. The Machine That Will Not Sit Still. A book can be hard because the ideas are hard. That is ordinary difficulty. The prince has a different problem. The ideas are often blunt and clear. The difficulty is that the book will not tell you how to take them. 4 features of the text generate the war. Name them one at a time. The first is the silence of the author behind the advice. Machiavelli tells you what a prince must do. He rarely tells you whether he approves. When he writes that a ruler must learn how not to be good, the sentence sits there without a frame. Is this a confession, a warning, an instruction, or a lament? The grammar does not say. A teacher saying do this and a witness saying this is what they do use almost identical words. The text hands you the words and withholds the stance. The second feature is the gap between the 2 books. The prince teaches one man how to hold power over a city. The Discourses teaches a free people how to keep power for itself. Same author, overlapping years, opposite hero. One book admires Rome's liberty. The other coaches the kind of ruler Rome's republic was built to prevent. Any reading of one book has to explain its relationship to the other. And the texts themselves do not announce that relationship. You have to supply it. The third feature is the example that points both ways. Machiavelli loves the concrete case. He gives you Cesare Borgia, Agathocles, the murdered lieutenant left in 2 pieces in the public square. But an example is not an argument until someone says what it is an example of. The same brutal episode can show that cruelty works, or show the reader exactly what cruelty looks like so they will recognize it in their masters. The deed is fixed on the page. The lesson is not. The fourth feature is the missing definition at the center. The book turns on a single word, virtue, and Machiavelli never pins it down. Sometimes it means skill, sometimes ruthlessness, sometimes courage or foresight, or the raw force that bends events. The hinge of the whole argument is a term left deliberately open. Fill it with one meaning, and you get the cold technician. Fill it with another, and you get something closer to a civic hero. The book makes you choose, and then hides the fact that you chose. Put these 4 features together, and a pattern appears. The text states facts about power with great force, and systematically withholds the stance, the frame, the lesson, and the definition. That withholding is the engine. Every reader who wants a complete reading has to supply what the book leaves out. And what you supply comes from you, from your century, your politics, your prior picture of the man. This is why interpretation here is not optional. With most books, interpretation is a luxury layered on top of a plain meaning. With this one, there is no plain meaning underneath to fall back on. The gaps are load-bearing. You cannot read the book at all without filling them, and the filling is where the war begins. So the 4 great readings are not arbitrary. Each is a disciplined way of filling the same gaps. The first one fills them by deciding that the silence hides a man who knew exactly what he was teaching and meant it. Part 3. 400 Years of Combat. Before the scholars there was the stage, and on the stage Machiavelli was the devil. Within a few decades of his death, English playwrights had a stock villain they called the Machiavel, a grinning schemer who poisons, betrays, and confides his wickedness to the audience. Christopher Marlowe brought the figure on stage to speak a prologue that counts religion a childish toy. This is the first reading, and it was a caricature, but it set the shape of everything after. The name became a synonym for calculated evil before most readers had met the actual sentences. The Church made it official. In 1559, the papacy placed Machiavelli's works on the Index of Forbidden Books. The register of texts Catholics were barred from reading. The condemnation was total. A French writer named Gentilet produced a long attack blaming Machiavelli for the massacre of Protestants, fixing him in the public mind as a teacher of tyranny and irreligion. For roughly 2 centuries the verdict held. Machiavelli was the apostle of evil, cited to be denounced. Then something interesting happened. The denunciation became too convenient. In the 18th century, Frederick the Great of Prussia, while still a crown prince, wrote a point-by-point refutation called the Anti-Machiavel. A future conqueror publicly washing his hands of the teacher of conquest. The philosopher Voltaire helped him polish it and get it printed, and readers noticed the obvious irony. Here was a rising military monarch loudly condemning the book that described what rising military monarchs actually do. The condemnation started to look like a performance. That suspicion opened the door to a complete reversal. If a tyrant wants this book suppressed, perhaps the book is not on the side of tyrants. 2 major figures said so directly. Spinoza, in his political writings, suggested that this most shrewd man may have meant to show how careful a free people should be before trusting its safety to one ruler. Rousseau went further. He wrote that while pretending to instruct kings, Machiavelli did much to teach the people. He called The Prince the Book of Republicans. So, within 200 years, the same text had flipped from a manual for tyrants to a warning against them, without a single word of it changing. That flip is the whole puzzle in historical form. The 19th century added a third frame. Italy was fragmenting and fighting for unification, and Machiavelli's final chapter, a passionate call to drive foreign armies out of Italy, was lifted up as prophecy. He became a patriot, a founding voice of the nation, his bones honoured with a monument. Notice what has happened across these centuries. Devil, then patriot. Teacher of tyranny, then weapon of the people. The readings do not refine toward agreement. They swing to opposite poles, depending on who needs him and when. This is the raw material the modern scholars inherited. Not a stable text slowly being clarified, but a text that had already proven it would serve any master. The 20th century's achievement was to stop swinging and start asking why the swinging was possible. 3 serious answers emerged, and they are still fighting. One says he was doing a new kind of science. One says he was teaching evil and knew it. One says he was speaking a language we had simply forgotten how to hear. Take the science first, because it is the reading that tries to lift him out of the moral fight altogether. Part 4. The Man Who Described What We Do. Begin with the picture this reading reacts against. For 2,000 years, serious writing about politics asked one question above all. What is the best life, and what kind of state helps people live it? Plato described the just city. Aristotle asked which arrangements let a citizen flourish. The medieval thinkers asked how the state serves a soul bound for God. Politics was a branch of ethics. You started from the good and worked down to the institutions. The ruler's first job was to be virtuous, and a virtuous ruler would, it was assumed, also be an effective one. Now feel where that picture strains. Look at the actual rulers of history. Many of the effective ones were not good men. Many of the good men lost, and their cities fell, and their people suffered for it. The tradition had an answer for this, but it was a moral answer. The wicked ruler will be punished, if not here, then hereafter. His success is hollow. That answer satisfies the soul. It does not help the man who has to actually hold a city next year. This is the gap the third reading says Machiavelli stepped into. He stopped asking what a ruler should be and asked what actually works. The move is best seen in one sentence of his. He writes that he is departing from the imagined republics that other writers built, because there is such a gap between how men live and how they ought to live, that a ruler who studies the ought rather than the is will be destroyed. Read that as a methodological declaration. He is announcing a switch from the ideal to the observed. That switch is what earns him the title of founder. The philosopher Ernst Cassirer argued that Machiavelli studied political moves the way a later scientist would study forces, with the moral judgment held back so the mechanism could be seen clearly. On this view, his coldness is not cruelty. It is the detachment of any observer who wants to see how a thing behaves rather than how he wishes it behaved. Make the analogy precise because it carries the reading. A doctor studying a poison does not endorse poisoning. The pharmacologist who maps exactly how a toxin stops the heart is not recommending murder. He is describing a mechanism. The description is useful precisely because it is neutral. This reading says Machiavelli did that for power. He mapped how cruelty, fear and deceit operate in the holding of a state, the way one maps how a toxin operates in a body. The strength of this reading is real. It explains the book's strangest quality, the flat tone. When Machiavelli describes Borgia having his own enforcer cut in half and displayed to a satisfied, stunned crowd, he does not recoil and he does not gloat. He explains why it worked. The people were at once satisfied and stupefied. That tone is exactly the tone of someone describing a mechanism, not someone savouring a crime. Now press on the reading until it strains, because it does. A pure scientist of politics would have no preferences about outcomes. The astronomer does not root for one planet. But Machiavelli is not neutral. He wants Italy unified. He wants the foreigners driven out. The last chapter of The Prince is not cold description. It is a cry. A man who only describes mechanisms does not end his book pleading for a saviour to free his country. So the clean image of the detached scientist cannot be the whole truth. There is a partisan inside the observer. The second strain is sharper. Describing a mechanism and recommending its use are different acts. and Machiavelli does the second constantly. He does not write that princes who use cruelty well tend to survive. He writes that the prince should do it. Here is when, here is how. The pharmacologist who not only maps the poison but tells you the dose and the moment to administer it has stopped being only a scientist. The advice is in the imperative, and an imperative carries a stance the pure scientist was supposed to lack. So the science reading captures something no one can deny, the great cold turn from the ideal to the real. But it cannot hold the whole man, because the man keeps recommending and keeps wanting, and a true scientist does neither. That residue, the recommending and the wanting, is exactly what the next reading seizes. It agrees that Machiavelli did something new and shocking. It denies that he was innocent about it. It says he knew precisely what he was teaching, and that what he was teaching was evil. Part 5. The Teacher of Evil. This reading belongs above all to one man, Leo Strauss, and it opens with a deliberate provocation. Strauss begins his study by saying plainly that he will call Machiavelli a teacher of evil. He knows the word sounds old-fashioned. That is the point. He thinks the modern habit of explaining the scandal away, of making Machiavelli safe, is itself the thing to resist. But the provocation rests on a method, and the method is what makes this reading powerful rather than merely stern. Strauss built his career on a claim about how certain books are written. He argued that in ages when speaking freely was dangerous, serious writers learned to write on two levels. A surface, safe and respectable for the ordinary reader and the censor, and underneath, for the careful reader, a second teaching, the real one, conveyed through contradictions, odd silences, strange examples and errors too deliberate to be mistakes. He called this esoteric writing, writing with a hidden inner doctrine. Feel the problem this method is built to solve. We saw that the prince withholds its stance. Most readers treat that silence as ambiguity. Strauss treats it as a code. The silence is not the author failing to tell you what he thinks. It is the author telling you, in the only way that was safe, that what he thinks cannot be said out loud. So, where the gaps in the text look like openness to other readers, to Strauss they look like a craftsman's deliberate marks. The contradiction between the prince and the discourses is not carelessness. It is placed there. The reader who notices it and works out which side is the surface and which is the depth is being inducted into the real teaching. Here is what Strauss says the real teaching is. Machiavelli is not just advising princes. He is launching an attack on the entire moral and religious tradition of the West. The classical and Christian world said that man should aim high, at virtue, at the good, at God, and accept that he will often fail. Machiavelli says, lower the aim. Stop measuring politics against a heaven it can never reach. Measure it against what men actually do, and build on that. This is why Strauss thinks the science reading is naive. The cold detachment is not the innocence of a scientist. It is the weapon of a revolutionary. By teaching us to study man as he is rather than as he should be, Machiavelli is not describing the tradition. He is demolishing it and putting a new foundation under politics, one with no floor of virtue beneath it. On this reading, Machiavelli founds modernity. The later thinkers who built politics on self-interest, on fear, on the management of passions rather than the cultivation of virtue, are his heirs. He went first. He lowered the standard, and the modern world is what got built on the lower ground. Notice the strange respect in calling him a teacher of evil. Strauss is not saying Machiavelli was a thug. He is saying Machiavelli was a thinker of the first rank who saw the old morality clearly, judged it and chose against it, knowing exactly what he was doing. The evil is not impulsive. It is deliberate, philosophical, and aimed at the root. The strength of this reading is that it takes the scandal seriously instead of laundering it. Every other reading wants, in some way, to make Machiavelli acceptable. The scientist was only describing. The Republican was secretly on our side. Strauss alone says no. The shock you feel on first reading is the correct response, and the work of interpretation is to understand the shock, not dissolve it. Now the strains, and they are serious. The first is that the method can prove almost anything. Once you decide that the surface of a text is a mask, and that contradictions are clues to a hidden meaning, you have given yourself permission to find a doctrine the words never state. Pocock, one of the great historians of this material, dismissed the Straussian practice of reading hidden meanings into numbers and silences with open contempt. His charge was simple. A method that lets you hear what the author did not say can hear whatever the interpreter wants. The hidden teaching starts to look like the reflection of the reader. The second strain is historical. Strauss reads Machiavelli as a solitary genius reaching across the centuries to overturn the tradition as a whole. But Machiavelli was a working Florentine official writing in a specific crisis, in the ordinary political vocabulary of his city. The portrait of the lonely founder of modernity may say more about the grandeur Strauss wanted to find than about the busy diplomat who actually held the pen. Hold on to that second objection, because it is not just a complaint, it is a rival program. It says the way to understand the book is not to decode a timeless secret, but to recover the lost world of words Machiavelli was actually using. Put him back among his contemporaries, hear his terms as they heard them, and the teacher of evil may turn out to be saying something his first readers found far less strange than we do. That is the next reading, and it comes armed with the tools of the historian. Part 6. He was speaking a language. We forgot. Start with a mistake everyone makes and barely notices making it. When you read a word from 500 years ago, you hear it in your own meaning. You cannot help it. The word looks the same, but words drift. A term that meant one thing to a Florentine in 1513 may mean something quite different to you. Read his word in your sense, and you will understand him perfectly and wrongly. This is the opening move of the Cambridge School, the historians Quentin Skinner and John Pocock above all. Their claim is a method before it is a conclusion. To know what a writer meant, you must recover what he was doing with his words, in the language available to him at the time. A sentence is not just a string of meanings. It is a move in a conversation. To say, "I do not approve," only makes sense against the things people were then saying and expecting. Recover the conversation, and the move becomes legible. Lose the conversation, and you are left guessing from the words alone. So Skinner asks a question the other readers skip. What were the standard things one said about princes and rulers in Machiavelli's world? And what was he doing by saying what he said against that background? The answer reshapes everything. There was an entire genre of books advising rulers called Mirrors for Princes. They were everywhere, and they were predictable. They told the prince that to keep power he must be just, merciful, honest and generous. That virtue and success ran together. Be good, and you will be strong and loved. Now put the prince back into that crowded shelf. Machiavelli takes the standard list of princely virtues, the very ones every mirror praised, and goes through them one by one. Generosity, he says, will ruin you. Mercy, misapplied, breeds disorder that kills more than cruelty would. Honesty, kept always, hands you to men who lie. Read in isolation, that is the cynic's catalogue. Read against the genre, it is something sharper. It is a deliberate line-by-line demolition of the comfortable lie those books told. He is not randomly praising vice. He is answering a specific dominant tradition and turning each of its claims over to show the danger underneath. That recovery already softens the demon. The shocking sentences are not free-floating wickedness. They are counterstrokes in a known debate. But Pocock pushes the method further and arrives at the heart of this reading. Pocock argued that there was a whole political language alive in the Italian cities and inherited from Rome, which he called the language of civic republicanism. Its central concern was a single problem. How does a free self-governing community survive in time when time brings corruption, faction, and decay? In that language, the key word was the one we met before, virtue. And here it does not mean private moral goodness at all. It means the quality in citizens and leaders that lets a free state resist decay and hold itself together. Energy, civic courage, the willingness to act for the common body even at personal cost. Feel what this does to the book. When Machiavelli demands virtue, the Christian reader hears a man praising a quality that licenses cruelty. But in the Republican language, he is naming the force without which a free people cannot keep its freedom. The same word, two different worlds. So, on the Cambridge reading, the teacher of evil dissolves. What is left is a man working inside a recognizable tradition, obsessed with how communities stay free, using the technical vocabulary of that tradition with unusual honesty about its costs. He looks monstrous to us only because we lost the language and kept the words. The strength here is discipline. This is the reading that does the most homework. It does not decode hidden secrets or project modern science backward. It reconstructs, from the surviving texts, the actual web of meanings Machiavelli wrote inside. When it tells you what a word meant, it can show you who else used it that way, and when. Now the strain, and it falls exactly where the strength is. The method is superb at recovering what was sayable. It is weaker at telling you what one writer in particular believed. Knowing the language a man spoke does not tell you everything he did with it. A poet and a propagandist can share a vocabulary. Recovering the shared idiom of republicanism explains the words on the page. It does not, by itself, settle whether Machiavelli was defending liberty, coaching a tyrant, or doing something more unsettling than either. And there is the harder problem, the one the whole video keeps circling. The prince, on its face, is addressed to a single ruler and tells him how to keep a city under his control. The Republican reading has to explain that away. It can. It points to the discourses, to Machiavelli's career, to the genre. But it is doing work to make the most famous political book in the West not mean what it most obviously says. There is a reading that refuses to do that work and instead takes the offence head-on. It accepts that the prince really is addressed to a tyrant, really does teach him how to rule. And it argues that this is precisely the point. The advice is a trap. Part 7. The Trap. Hold the central contradiction in front of you, undiluted. In the discourses, Machiavelli loves liberty and despises tyrants. In The Prince, he hands a tyrant the tools to rule. Same man, same convictions, as far as we can tell from his life. The Republican reading says the books point the same way once you decode the language. But what if they point the same way for a colder reason? What if the prince only looks like help? This is the satire thesis, and it was hinted at long before it was argued. We heard Rousseau say the book secretly teaches the people, and Spinoza suggest it warns free men against trusting one ruler. In our own time, the political theorist Mary Dietz gave the idea its sharpest form, and it is worth following her closely, because she does what the hint never did. She names the mechanism. Dietz's claim is specific. The Prince is an act of deception aimed at its own reader. Machiavelli, a committed Republican, is writing to Lorenzo de' Medici, the man holding Florence down, and he is giving advice that, if followed, would help bring Lorenzo down and the Republic back. The argument lives in the details, so take the strongest one. Machiavelli urges the prince to arm his own people, to put weapons in the hands of the citizens rather than rely on hired soldiers. On its face, this is sound counsel. A loyal armed populace is strong. But look at the specific situation. Lorenzo rules a city with a deep Republican memory, a city that resented the Medici and had thrown them out before. Telling that ruler to hand weapons to that population is telling him to arm the very people most likely to rise against him. The grandfather had disarmed Florence for exactly this reason. The grandson is being advised, sweetly, to undo that. Dietz reads several of the book's recommendations this way. Live in the city rather than safe behind walls. Court the people. Each sounds like wisdom. Each, applied to this prince in this city, exposes him. The book is a beautifully wrapped instruction to walk off a cliff. She finds a model for it in Machiavelli's own pages. He admired the Roman who pretended loyalty to the kings, won their trust, and used the access to destroy them from inside. Deceit as the weapon of the man who lacks an army. Machiavelli had no army. He had a pen and a prince who might read him. The appeal of this reading is that it dissolves the central contradiction completely. The other readings strain to reconcile the two books. The satire thesis says there is nothing to reconcile. The lover of liberty and the adviser of tyrants are the same man doing one thing, attacking tyranny by the only means left to a defeated Republican. The prince is a weapon disguised as a gift. Now the strain, and here it is close to fatal, so state it at full force. A trap only works if the victim does not see it. But Machiavelli did not whisper this advice to Lorenzo alone. The book was meant to be read, and was read, by everyone. If the bad advice is bad enough for us, the later readers, to detect the trap, then it was detectable by the prince's own advisers, who were not fools. A trap that announces itself to every reader except the target is not a trap. It is a riddle that depends on the one man in the room being uniquely blind. There is a second problem. The advice in The Prince is not obviously self-destructive. Generations of hard-headed rulers and strategists have read it as genuinely useful. If the counsel were really poison dressed as medicine, it should have failed those who swallowed it. Instead, it built a reputation for cold effectiveness. That is strange poison. And there is a documented reply from within the debate itself. The scholar John Langton answered Dietz directly. He agreed the two books must be reconciled, but proposed the opposite mechanism. Machiavelli was not trapping the prince. He was teaching him in the hope that a strong principality might, over time, mature into a republic. Same evidence, same contradiction to be solved. Opposite solution. Even the attempt to fix the meaning splits into rival readings. The book infects its own solutions. So step back and look at where we are. 4 powerful readings: the scientist, the teacher of evil, the recovered republican, the setter of traps. Each grips part of the text. Each strains somewhere else. None defeats the others. The natural conclusion is that we have not yet found the right key, that with more work one reading will win. The deepest reading in the whole tradition says the opposite. It says we will never find a key, and it explains why by locating the trouble not in the book but in morality itself. Part 8. The Weapon. Before that final turn, watch the readings step off the page and into history, because it proves something the theories only assert. A merely academic puzzle stays in libraries. This one kept being picked up and fired. Return to the last chapter of The Prince. After all the cold counsel, the book ends in heat. A direct cry to drive the foreign armies out of Italy, to unify the peninsula, closing on lines of patriotic verse. For the science reading this ending is an embarrassment. For what came next, it was a banner. When Italy fought to become one nation in the 19th century, that chapter was lifted out and read as prophecy. Machiavelli, the cold analyst, was refashioned into Machiavelli, the patriot saint, the man who had foreseen the nation 3 centuries early. The same sentences that looked like detached science to one reader became a national scripture to another. Then the reading turned darker, and the turn matters. The cult of the strong unifier, the leader who does what must be done to forge a people, fed naturally into the worship of the man of action. In the 20th century, Italian fascism claimed Machiavelli as an ancestor. Mussolini associated himself with the book and praised its realism about power. The teacher of evil reading, in other words, did not stay a scholarly thesis. It became a flag for a regime. And against that, from inside a fascist prison, came the most creative political reading of all. Antonio Gramsci, a communist jailed by Mussolini's state, sat with the same book and produced something new. He proposed that the modern prince could no longer be a single man. The new prince, the agent that would do for the people what Machiavelli's prince did for himself, was the political party, the collective organizer of a class. Gramsci took the Republican and popular currents others had found in the text and turned them into a theory of revolutionary organization. The handbook for a tyrant became, in his hands, a handbook for the party of the oppressed. So, inside roughly 1 century, the same final chapter served the nation-builders, then the fascists, then the communists imprisoned by those fascists. Each was a serious reader. Each found real support in the text. Each was using the book as a weapon pointed in a different direction. This is the historical proof of the puzzle we started with. The instability of the prince is not a feature of 1 century's misreading that later centuries corrected. It is permanent. Every age that has needed the book has been able to make it serve, and the readings do not converge. They keep diverging because the conflict is built in. That raises the question we have been deferring. Why this book? Plenty of old texts are ambiguous and do not generate 4 centuries of armed disagreement. The deepest answer says the disagreement is not really about the book at all. The book is just the place where a far larger fracture shows through, a fracture in morality itself. Part 9. 2 Worlds, No Judge. The deepest reading comes from Isaiah Berlin, and it begins by clearing away every reading we have met. Berlin surveyed the interpretations, the wicked Machiavelli, the scientific one, the patriotic one, the satirical one, and found each insufficient. Then he proposed that Machiavelli's real achievement was something none of them named, and that he may not have fully intended it himself. Here is the claim. Machiavelli did not reject morality. He uncovered the existence of 2 of them. Take the first morality, the Christian one and the classical ethics folded into it. It prizes humility, charity, mercy, the saving of the soul, the turning of the other cheek. It treats gentleness as strength and worldly glory as a snare. Under this morality, a good man would rather suffer wrong than commit it. Now the second. The morality of the ancient city, of republican Rome, the values Machiavelli plainly loved. It prizes courage, civic strength, public glory, the vigour that founds and defends a free state. Under this morality, the highest thing is a great and lasting political community. And the man who lets it fall out of squeamishness has failed at the only test that counts. Berlin's move is to insist that both of these are real, complete moralities, not one true ethic and one mere appetite dressed up. 2 full systems, each with its own coherent picture of the good life, each noble on its own terms. And now the blade. These 2 cannot both be lived to the full at once. The qualities that make a saint, the meekness, the refusal of force, the forgiveness, are exactly the qualities that will lose a city. The qualities that save the city, the readiness to deceive, to strike first, to spend blood for the common good, are exactly the ones that damn the soul under Christian terms. This is sharper than saying politics is hard, or that sometimes you must dirty your hands. The dirty hands idea assumes there is still one true morality, which you regretfully violate. Berlin's Machiavelli says something worse. There is no single true morality being violated. There are 2, and they issue contradictory commands, and there is no third standard above them to say which is right. Sit with that absence, because it is the whole point. We are used to moral conflict. We assume that in principle a wise enough judge, with God's view or pure reason, could rank the options and tell us the answer. Berlin's claim is that for some conflicts there is no such judge. Not that we lack access to the higher court. That there is no higher court. The values are simply incommensurable, meaning there exists no common scale on which to weigh them against each other. Make it concrete. A leader can save thousands by authorizing one act of calculated treachery. The Christian scale says the treachery stains him absolutely, whatever the result. The civic scale says refusing it and letting thousands die for his clean conscience is the real crime. These are not two estimates of one quantity. They are two different quantities. There is no exchange rate between a saved soul and a saved city. Now see what this does to Machiavelli. He is not immoral. He is not even, at bottom, the founder of a cold science. He is the man who looked steadily at the two value systems Western civilization runs on, and reported that they do not fit together and never will, and that you must choose. That is why Berlin calls it the originality of Machiavelli. Not the advice about lions and foxes. The shattering of an assumption almost everyone before him shared without noticing they held it. The assumption that all genuine values form, in the end, one harmonious system. That the truly good, the truly just, and the truly successful must ultimately agree. Berlin gave this larger idea a name. He called it value pluralism, the view that there are many real human goods, that they genuinely conflict, and that no single ranking reconciles them all. Liberty can collide with equality, mercy with justice, loyalty with truth. And when they collide, you're not solving a puzzle with a hidden answer. You are choosing and losing something real, whichever way you go. This explains the 400-year war as nothing else does. The book will not sit still because it sits on the fault line between two moral worlds. Read it standing in the Christian world, and Machiavelli is a teacher of evil. Read it standing in the civic world, and he is a clear-eyed patriot describing necessity. Both readers are looking at the same page. They are standing in different moralities. The disagreement was never really about Machiavelli's intentions. It was about which moral world the reader already lived in. The book is a mirror that shows each age its own deepest commitment, and the ages do not share one. Part 10. The Knife Turns. Berlin's reading feels like the resting place, the deepest level where the long war is finally explained. But it contains a blade pointed at itself. An intellectual honesty requires that we pick it up. Follow Berlin's own logic without flinching. He says there is no vantage point above the rival moral worlds. No higher court, no neutral scale, no God's eye view from which one morality can be judged the true one. Every moral judgment is made from within some particular world of values. There is no view from nowhere. Now turn that claim back onto Berlin's own reading, because his reading is also a judgment. It is a claim about what Machiavelli really achieved, made from somewhere. And where is Berlin standing when he says morality is plural? He is standing in a particular modern tradition. a liberal, tolerant, pluralist world that prizes the open acceptance of many values and recoils from the single absolute truth. That world is not nowhere. It is a place with its own commitments, as particular as the Christian world or the civic one. So here is the trap closing. If Berlin is right that no reading can claim the neutral high ground, then his reading cannot claim it either. His pluralism is not the final truth standing above the fight. It is one more position inside the fight. A fifth reading, sitting beside the other four, not above them. Feel how strange this is. The deepest interpretation, the one that explained why all the others conflict, turns out to be subject to its own verdict. It diagnosed everyone else as speaking from a particular world. It cannot exempt itself. A monist could press exactly here, and we should let them, at full strength. The monist believes there is, in the end, one true ordering of values. That monist says to Berlin, "You have not proved values are plural. You have only proved that you, a modern liberal, prefer to see them that way. Your pluralism is itself just one moral world's opinion by your own argument. So why should I, standing in mine, accept it as the truth about all of them? The pluralist has no neutral ground from which to answer, because he was the one who told us neutral ground does not exist. This is not a flaw to be patched. It is the idea completing itself. Value pluralism, taken to the end, cannot sit above the moral world. It has to take its place within it as one contested view among others. And that is the real lesson of the 400-year war. We began thinking the disagreement over Machiavelli was a problem, a puzzle that the right reading would finally solve. We end seeing that the disagreement is not a problem at all. It is what a certain kind of universe looks like from the inside. If there is one truth about value, then one reading of Machiavelli is finally correct, and the others are errors awaiting correction. The war is temporary. If there are many irreducible values and no court above them, then the war is permanent, and so is the argument about whether the war is permanent. There is no last word, including this one. So the fight over a thin book by a Florentine official was never really about him. Every reader who picked it up and found a tyrant or a patriot or a scientist or a liberator was reporting the shape of their own moral world. The book is a thin place where the deeper question shows through. And the deeper question is the oldest one there is. Whether, beneath all our conflicts, there is a single good that would reconcile us if only we could see it. Or whether we live among many goods that will not be reconciled, choosing in the dark, losing something true with every choice, with no judge to tell us we chose well. Machiavelli will not settle that for you. That is not his failure. It is the most honest thing a book can do. It hands the question back and lets you discover which world you were standing in all along.